and welcome back to another GTN Coaches Corner, where you can treat me like your own personal coach. Send us in any triathlon training or related questions using the hashtag GTN Coaches Corner. We've got a load of great questions, starting off with this banger from Rob Fetty this week. Could you discuss the differences between FTP and CP? If you know your CP or FTP, is there a good way to then know the power you could do for 5 or 6 hours? Is there a better or different test for that power? Right, FTP, CP. So FTP is your functional threshold power. CP is your critical power. Now, they are both used interchangeably quite often, but that isn't necessarily true. Yes, whilst the numbers are fairly similar, they are not the same. Now, FTP, roughly speaking, is the maximum power that you can sustain for 60 minutes. There's a few different tests for that. Famously, you've probably all heard of the 20-minute test. 20 minutes all out. You then take your average power from that test and then take 95% of that average power, and that gives you your functional threshold power. It produces a single figure that's easy to work with and very easy to understand. Critical power is the power output you'll tend towards when riding at a slightly higher intensity, normally around 30 to 40 minutes. So yes, slightly higher number. The big difference with this test is it requires a few all-out efforts that produces essentially a power curve, and then you're able to assess your ability over different intensities and different durations versus just a long sustained effort. Now there's a couple of different ways of testing this. There's the 2-step test and the 4-step test, which are most popular or most well known. The 2-step test is a 3-minute all-out effort and a 12-minute all-out effort. The 4-step test is the same, and to be honest, you can kind of choose what you do elsewhere between or after that, so you can do sort of say a 3, a 5, a 12 and a 20. That's quite commonly used, and then you plug all those numbers into quite a fancy equation. I'm not going to run through that right now and bore you, but the benefit to the critical power test is it produces this power curve and you're able to understand more about your physiology, your ability over different intensities. So this sort of lends itself to quite dynamic racing, such as the short course ITU racing that we see in triathlon, crits, that sort of thing. For a lot of people out there watching this, amateurs racing perhaps over longer distances, whilst it may be interesting, you maybe don't need to get bogged down in all these numbers, W prime, critical power, etc. To be honest, you are going to be holding a pretty sustained power and trying to keep your pace pretty even over a long period of time. And for that, FTP, to be honest, in my opinion, is pretty good for that. Now, to answer your question, 5 to 6 hours, that can be calculated from your FTP. Now, assuming this is for an Ironman, so you're doing this after a swim and with a run to come, you're probably talking around 76 to 78% of your FTP for a 5 to 6 hour bike split. Give or take, obviously, if you're just doing a solo bike effort, that may go up a fraction because you're not taking the swim and the run into account. Great question though, and do stay tuned because I think we'll probably be doing a video on this talking about critical power and FTP in the very near future. Right, next question. Pettycam Films, how can you determine your swimming threshold pace? So kind of similar question, but for swimming. So the go-to here, or my go-to at least, is critical swim speed, CSS. I know we're not talking coding on computers. This is essentially your best effort for 20 minutes. Now, to calculate this, we do a 200 meter all-out effort and a 400 meter all-out effort. Have a little bit of a break, obviously, between that. You can swim. I'd sort of normally suggest 5 to 10 minutes of just light swimming and then crack on with a 400 meter all-out effort. You then plug those numbers into an online calculator. Again, I could run you through the calculation, but it's very boring. And that essentially gives you your CSS per 100 meters, which is basically your threshold pace per 100 meters. Of course, this is a good indicator to say of your threshold pace, but don't just suddenly try using that for your Ironman swim pace, where you're going to be swimming for around an hour or something. All right, nice one. Next one from Gabrielle Cesarali. How similar are easy bike rides and easy runs in terms of adaptation? If I bike to work every day, lots of easy rides, can I focus purely on interval or tempo runs, dropping the easy ones or generally reducing the overall running volume and still managing a polarized training style? I feel like more runs, even if easy, could severely compromise my recovery. Very good question. Yes, running is obviously more weight bearing. You experience also a lot more impact through your body with running. So yes, cycling therefore is a great way of building cardiovascular fitness without this additional or extra stresses on your body. I've actually known very good runners in the past that have used cycling to complement their running and have performed very well off of that. In fact, Kat Matthews, who has recently just placed second at the Ironman World Championships, has actually spoken to us about the fact that she basically uses cycling to build her cardiovascular fitness, then just focuses on quality run sessions. So she's not doing a huge run volume, but still obviously getting the benefit. So yes, if you are commuting into work on the bike, brilliant. That's a great way of building up that fitness. And then the key then is making sure that when you do those run sessions, it's good quality, good focus sessions, and you've got a good plan for those. Where possible though, I would probably suggest just mixing up. So occasionally maybe dropping one of those bike rides just for the occasional easy run. Make sure you're getting some of those longer runs as well, because it is really good just for mixing up your paces and ultimately improving your running efficiency rather than just becoming quite sort of single paced and kind of, I guess, ironic because your single pace would be at quite a high speed versus most people that end up single paced at kind of a grey zone, maybe slightly slower than they were hoping. So yeah, great question, and actually something that I have used with some athletes in the past and seen a lot of positivity, particularly where they maybe are slightly injury prone. Right, moving on, because I've spent a while on that one. Holly Dunn Design has asked, basically this one is about weight. So she's recently lost 10 kilograms and her running and cycling is feeling so much faster and easier. The trouble is that her swimming is only getting slower despite swimming 2 to 3 times per week. I come from a swim background, so have decent technique and mix my swims up with a variety of strokes and drills. What would you recommend to get my swim back up to speed? More drills, speed work, high volume? Thanks in advance. Well, first off, 10 kilograms is quite a lot. So this isn't a huge surprise to me. I guess the key with this, and I'm sure you have gone about it very well, is just making sure if you are losing weight, full stop, but also a substantial amount of weight, like 10 kilograms, you do it healthily and you do it gradually. A sudden drop in weight you will feel and notice in your performance. I have actually made this mistake once before, not intentionally, but I focused a lot on my running and was being a little bit more careful about what I was eating, and I dropped a lot of weight in a short space of time. And whilst I saw a significant improvement in my run, and yes, I was biking fairly well, but I didn't feel super strong, I really plummeted with my swimming. And that is because, well, a couple of things. The fat that you possibly had in your body before helps with your buoyancy, so now you're suddenly a slightly different position in the water, and also adds quite a bit of power and strength to your stroke. It's a little bit like a young kid having a massive growth spurt and suddenly their limbs are all uncoordinated. You're going to have to kind of teach yourself again about, not how to swim, but how to swim in a slightly different position in the water. So I would recommend some strength work in your swimming, so like pull work, paddles, maybe doing some IM, some mixing up the strokes just to get some strength work in there, but also making sure you mix in some speed work, so sort of like the polar opposite, so strength and speed just to get that top end in there. Try to avoid just swimming lots, whilst that may seem like the answer and maybe like the simple thing to do, you could end up very one-paced and actually making things worse for yourself. So quality, focused sessions. The fact that you come from a swimming background, you're probably noticing this more so because you've improved more in the run, and that's had an impact on the swim. So yeah. Anyway, Thomas K. Hey y'all, I come from a running background and taught myself how to swim freestyle by myself. However, I never had the focus on my kick. The other day, I thought I should do a few 25 meters kick with a kickboard in front. I was not able to complete the full 25. I was getting tired super fast and moved extremely slow. At the end, it almost felt like I was moving backwards. I suspect my kick does not come from my hips and that my feet are not pointed downwards. Any advice on how to improve my kick starting at 0? Quick one for you here. Pop on some fins that you can see behind me here. Whilst they may seem like cheating and you're just making things easier for yourself, they're actually really good, not only at building strength, because obviously they're increasing the surface area of your foot and making you work harder. It's really good for getting the movement of the legs. You kind of can't not move your legs correctly with those, and also it helps to stretch the ankles out a bit. Obviously that's bigger surface area, stretching the ankles a bit more, which tends to be a cause of people struggling with their kick, having tight ankles. You want to essentially have really soft floppy ankles when you kick. I mean, my big toe basically just knock against each other when I kick. But yeah, in terms of the technique, you are right. You want to be kicking, imagine this is my hip, my knee. You want to mostly be kicking from the hip. That said, you do want a soft knee, so don't just lock your knee out. And it should essentially be just a sort of like nice flick through to the ankle. But yeah, any more questions on kicking, because I appreciate it's quite a complex topic, do check out some of our kicking videos on the channel where we do run through all of this in quite a lot of depth. Penultimate question. Bill Lee, in regard to the running off the bike question, do you ever look at mixing the intensity of the brick sessions to help with the transition training? Maybe mix up a high intensity bike workout with an easy run, focusing on getting good form, and then perhaps the opposite, light spin on the bike and then a hard run off. Absolutely, and this is actually a really important thing. So my suggestion here is variety, and also with that, I mean, I know brick sessions tend to be a bit of a go-to and very popular. They do mean that you are running off the bike tired. That's the idea. But if you end up doing all your runs off the bike, which I know a lot of people do, partly for time efficiency, just trying to fit in training, they're like, right, well, I'm doing bike work, I'll do the run straight off it. Problem is, you're always running off the bike tired, so that may impact your form and also the quality of those runs. So make sure you do some fresh runs too. Okay, but yes, with the brick sessions, it's good focus to start doing some hard bike workouts, maybe just some easy runs off them. That's a good way of just getting used to running off the bike. You could also then do vice versa. So easy bikes and then doing a hard quality run session off. And then hopefully over time, you can actually build up to doing a bit of both. So you're doing hard bike, hard run straight off. Also, just one note here, you can be really smart and efficient with these brick sessions. So just because you are training for a 70.3, it doesn't mean that you need to do a 2.5 hour hardish bike ride with a run off to get that stimulus and essentially that kind of fatigue stimulus for the run off the bike. You could do an hour bike ride at FTP, zone 5 effort, so above that 70.3 effort and race pace, and get the same stimulus, same sort of fatigue in the legs, and then you can run off the bike. So just ways of being efficient with your training. Right, final question from Yihua Chang. Be doing my first triathlon at sprint distance soon in Venice Beach near LA. I just went to the beach to practice, but the water waves were so large that I couldn't even get past the incoming waves to reach the calmer sea where we are supposed to make a turn and start swimming properly along the coast. In addition to swimming in the ocean more often, are there any ways to prepare for this final or initial phase in the pool, like trying different breathing frequencies every 2-4 strokes, because my breathing time was largely controlled by the waves, doing more sprinting, etc., etc. So a lot of questions here. Well, first off, hats off for you to just get involved in triathlon, doing the sprint triathlon, but also doing one open water and where there's waves, because that will put a lot of people off, even quite experienced triathletes. That's not to say it's not possible. I'm sure you do incredibly well. Now we do actually have a video coming up on this very soon, so stay tuned. We'll be talking about swimming through waves and also how to body surf waves. The main thing, and it kind of goes against maybe one of your points in there, is actually to forget about your usual breathing pattern that you might do in the pool, because the waves don't care about that. The waves are going to dictate your breathing pattern to a degree. You need to time your breathing with the waves, and for that means sighting well. Now I'll run you through kind of my procedure as I sort of swim out through the waves. I will sight the waves, I'll make sure I'm breathing before, and then I will almost duck dive to that final stroke just before the wave's about to come towards me. I'll duck dive under, so you're creating an arch under the wave, pop up on the other side, breathe, sight, start sighting that next wave, and then you're going to go down under again. It's actually almost quite relaxing and therapeutic when you get it right. Obviously, maybe not so much in a race scenario when you're going all guns blazing, but in comparison to just trying to power through the waves and getting smashed by them, it is incredibly therapeutic and nice. Personally, I tend to breathe every 2, training and racing, but what I do is I breathe to either side when I need to, so I'll often start breathing every 2, I'll do that for quite a while, and then maybe someone will be on the right hand side or the sun's shining from another side, so I'll start breathing the other. So having the ability to swap is really good, but don't necessarily feel that you've got to breathe every 3 or 4. Every 2 is absolutely fine, and in my opinion, the more oxygen you can get in, great. Providing when you breathe it doesn't affect your stroke and slow you down. But yeah, great questions this week. Please do keep them coming in using the hashtag GTN Coaches Corner. If you enjoyed today's video, please do give it a thumbs up, give it a like. Drop any more questions in regards to the things that I've answered today in the comments section down below, and we'll see you next week.